Less, it created an environment where soldiers felt like the commander at least had their back, and there was some clarity on rules of engagement. But yes, you're getting, right now against the Islamic State, I mean, we're dropping leaflets on truck drivers of oil convoys telling them we're going to bomb you in an hour, rather than just bomb. You know why? Because they consider the driver of that truck a civilian casualty. That's how far we've sort of lost our mind in understanding what it takes to defeat an enemy. It's absurd.
This question relates to our Commander-in-Chief's latest Cuba-Argentine vacation. And the question was, Fidel Castro had some very angry thoughts, it must be, with Obama's visit. What is his status in Cuba? Can you talk about the Castro brothers?
I think they're actually in a great place, the Castro brothers, unfortunately. They didn't have to give up any political reforms, and they got massive economic investment. And I think we've had this fallacy, and it started with China, that if you open up economically, it will automatically lead to political reform. And we haven't seen that in China. Look at what the regime has done there. They have opened up and enriched themselves. They've enriched government-run corporations that enrich the regime or their cronies, and they use that money to crack down on their population. That is exactly the playbook. It's called the China model that Cuba will replicate with the support of regimes like China and North Korea and others, because it's the same axis of folks that help each other. So the Castro brothers are laughing all the way to the bank on this, and they're going to enrich themselves, and the likelihood of political change there is minimal, absent some sort of a unforeseen event that changes the leadership dynamic completely. So it's, once again, a completely foolish, short-sighted perspective from this administration. Their lodestar is engagement. Engagement is their end state. And again, ends and means is where they confuse it. Engagement is a find means. Reagan used it with the Soviet Union. But we also knew Reagan was an anti-communist. In this scenario, we've got an administration that is opening up their fist and they're putting their hand out to engage with avowed enemies in Iran and Cuba and elsewhere, and they're laughing all the way to their nuclear bomb and to their enriched regime in Cuba.
Can you comment on soldiers who are being held at Leavenworth prison for being soldiers?
Yeah, I don't know all the particulars of all those cases, and I do know Beverly Pearlson and a few others who are just tireless advocates for guys on the battlefield who have been a part of unfortunate incidents. There are some guys at Leavenworth who made really bad choices on the battlefield, and I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. There's a standard, there's an ethos, there's a belief that we are above what so many things that our enemies or others would do. But there are also plenty of guys there. Clint Lorenz is a name that comes to mind immediately, a lieutenant who made a tough call. I believe it was in Afghanistan. Was a little bit overzealous, but it was a really uncertain situation, and he ended up engaging a couple of guys on a motorbike, and because he didn't know if they were enemy or not, and the enemy uses motorbikes as suicide bombs, and it was actually found later on that these guys that were killed were actually tied to the insurgency, but the Army investigators hid it. There's just some shady stuff. So there are definitely guys in prison today in Leavenworth who have gotten the wrong side of justice, but there are also some guys there that there are going to be consequences for illegal actions as well. So it's a mixed bag.
Okay. With all we've heard with tonight and other times about the military, are there problems getting new recruits?
Well, one of the big problems getting new recruits is that I think only 30% of Americans who are eligible are actually qualified for military service. For reasons of obesity and intelligence and education, they're really only drawing from 30% of the population to begin with. And then you've got, right now they're meeting their recruiting goals, thankfully. But it is, yeah, I mean, over time, if you've demoralized the military, if you've got a VA system that looks like it doesn't work, although that's not a big part of the mindset of the psychology of an 19-year-old who's enlisting, but yeah, I mean, morale matters, and what people say to the next generation. I hear a lot of veterans. I'm not here yet on it at all, but I've heard veterans say, hey, I don't want my kids to join this military today. I can understand under Barack Obama in some ways with the rules of engagement and the culture, But I still want to believe and hope that there are plenty of Americans who understand what this country represents, that are willing to put their lives on the line, and families that understand the importance of that to encourage their son or daughter. I just hope we get a commander-in-chief befitting of that loyalty.
Yeah, good answer. That's really good. Well, here's a potential softball for you. Is Russia's Putin a peacemaker?
I looked into his eyes and saw his soul. I mean, I think a couple of administrations probably haven't gotten him right. He took the reset button and ran with it. And, you got Ukraine yelling for aid. And what are they yelling for? They're yelling for lethal aid. And the only thing we'll give them is non-lethal aid, is meals ready to eat. As Russian tanks and special operators infiltrate and create rebel forces and literally redrawn lines in Eastern Europe. And you've got John Kerry telling us that all those actions are so 19th century. Really, he's preaching to them saying, oh, this is all so centuries ago, while armies literally mobilized to take territory. So yeah, he's a thug. It's a gas station with a country affiliated to it. He's got massive energy interests that he is making sure he can further, and tightening his grip on power. And if you don't think Putin and others look back on the heydays of the Soviet Union and covet that, you're wrong. Of course they would love to bring back that predominance, and they're trying on the margins. And Obama says this, and he's right, we have the better cards. They don't have, but he's playing a better hand, even though we've got better cards, because he's playing a bold leadership hand.
This is a little channel change, but not much. What are your thoughts about Hagel taking waterboarding off the table?
I think it's a mistake. Absolutely a mistake. And thankfully, the next commander, who was it? Brennan recently, the CIA director, said that he wouldn't follow orders if he was told to. Well, guess what? I don't think you're going to be the CIA director under a President Cruz or President Trump, right? Probably going to get a new CIA director. And thankfully, well, this is the same guy who a couple of years ago said that it was those same enhanced interrogation techniques that helped lead to bin Laden. And now he's parroting the Obama line by saying, oh, it doesn't work, it's so inhumane. It's, again, political, completely. And these guys, they lose their mind and their principles when they get to Washington and they get access to power. You talk to folks that have been a part of that, they'll recognize that it works. You've got to use it selectively when necessary. And all it's going to take is an executive order from a new president to change that policy. And it would require explaining it to the American people. And I think if you explain why you use it and when you use it because of the nature of the enemy, the American people have the fortitude to understand that.
Here's sort of a blast from the past. Would you like to speak on the exchange of Bo Bergdahl for 5 terrorists?